Oh, goodness. There's still a few seats here. Is that a seat or not a seat? A seat, there's a seat. Got a seat there. There's a seat over there. Raise your hand if there's a seat next to you. And no, I don't need anything. Say, seat here. Oh, dear, okay. Okay. I'm Sara Scherr. Let's see, how are we going to do this? Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay. We're delighted you're here. Okay. Okay. Right. I'm Sara Scherr. I'm the president of EcoAgriculture Partners, and I'm also the chair of a global initiative called Landscapes for People, Food, and Nature Initiative, which is a coalition of more than 70 organizations around the world that are trying to learn more about integrated landscape management, do more, and advance policy and action on landscape management. And as I'm sure many of you in the room well know, one of the biggest challenges for integrated landscape management is how to finance for it. Because most of our financial institutions, most of our financing mechanisms, our financing screening criteria, et cetera, were really put together in an era where most financing was provided on a sector-by-sector level and not for integrated types of activities. So the Landscapes for People, Food, and Nature Initiative has been working since 2011, trying to explore different activities related to finance, learn a little more. There's surprisingly much more than we had thought we would find, but there are also many challenges. We produced a series of reports in, Seth, was it 2014, which was sort of the results of a scoping of this. There was further work done this year in the Global Landscape Forum meeting specifically on investment in London. And as a result of a lot of the work that's been going on by many, many partner organizations and leading thinkers and actors in this field, we are coming today to start to come with an idea of what are some of how do we operationalize the kind of financing that we need with integrated landscape management, and what are the kind of actions that we can take to try to accelerate this process? And so we will be talking about those things today. This is the white paper that's been produced. You can all get a copy. We have policy briefs here, somewhere around, outside, I guess, Lou, yeah, outside, and you can go to the website and download it later. I did want to also make a plug while I'm here, whoops, for another book that we launched with Global Canopy Program, Nature Conservancy, IDH, and WWF, called the Little Sustainable Landscapes book. And the reason that I'm mentioning that right now is I'm actually going to take the liberty of reading from it to tell you what our definition of integrated landscape management is, because we think that probably could avoid some of the questions that might otherwise come up. What page is it in? Here it is, okay? It's a bit long, but we all spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we could actually agree on. So this is where we are, not the last word, I'm sure. It's a way of managing the landscape that involves collaboration among multiple stakeholders with the purpose of achieving sustainable landscapes. The governance structure, size, and scope, and the number and type of stakeholders involved, including private sector, civil society, and government, can vary. The level of cooperation also varies, from information sharing and consultation to much more formal models with shared decision-making and joint implementation. So it covers a wide range of kinds of integrated landscape management that all obviously have different kinds of financial requirements, but we think some of the insights about this that are coming from this work will be helpful to all. Let's see. One of the things that we would love to have from you all is to know who you are, and if you're interested in staying to be part of this community of practice around financing. As you go outside, Lou, where are you? Yeah, Lou. We can either put a sign up and ask people to just put your email addresses, and we can get you into the listserv, or if you could just drop your card out there, we'll engage with you. Why don't you do that? Would you mind doing that, Lou? Okay, we'll pass that around. Thank you very much. We'll appreciate that. We are one of the organizations that has been most responsible for leadership on this issue of financing landscape initiatives is the United Nations Environment Program. And I'd like to invite, before we start, Miriam Fuller from UNEP to say a few words about really why UNEP has been investing so focused way on this.
Thank you, Sara. And let me first say that I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of UNEP. I have been working with UNEP for the last 8 years, but the last 2 years in particular, I have been coordinating their efforts to contribute to the development of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I guess what I'd like to do right now in just a few minutes is to intertwine for you integrated landscapes, the SDGs, and finance, because I think we have a global and a golden opportunity right now to do something about it. Why do I say that? There are two particular things I'd like you to focus on when you look at the SDGs. One is the fact that it calls for cross-sectoral and cross-stakeholder interventions and cooperations. And we heard a little bit about that in the plenary. It was really nice to see how the landscape approach is bringing us closer and closer to this understanding. Now, the SDGs have indeed adopted that. Yes, we have 17 goals. It appears as if they're all in their little silos, but no, if you look at if you look at the preamble, if you look at the intentions, the intention is that these are indivisible. They are not each goal being done on its own in its own silo. They are not to be disassembled. They are to be achieved in one go at the same time for all peoples. And please keep that message with you because it's a very easy one to lose. The second one, of course, is that it's the balancing of the economic, the social, environmental, and thankfully the governance issues that is going to help us where we're going. Why? Because it's only through that that we can actually address the drivers of change that we want to address and therefore have irreversible change. So the second thing is, the second aspect of the whole SDGs, which I want you to focus on, is this issue of information management and where and what do we do with that information. The SDGs have very, very nicely adopted the whole notion of disaggregation. This might appear so, I don't know, academic to you, but it isn't. In the past, we only monitored 2 or 3 things: gender, age, income. That's it. That's all we monitored. However, now with the SDGs, we are being asked to monitor at least 10, 15 different things, and among them, the geographical and location of peoples. Now, that in itself, that one little gain that we had in the SDGs, opens the door for us to bring the landscape approach in, and I really want you to think about it that way. Today, with the technological advances that we have no excuse. We can do it. We can actually find all the spatially disaggregated data that we want. We can find geospatial information. We can integrate it into statistics. We can integrate it into population data, whatever. We have the ability to do it. And not only do I say, when I say we, I don't mean a small elite that works on these things. In fact, every stakeholder can have access to this type of information today and can contribute it to that. So information, SDGs, a whole array of 17 goals that we need to be working on. What does that all mean to you and to me? I think it means complexity. For once, we are now able to embrace complexity. It's great. For up to now, we've been shying away from it, but we can now actually embrace it. So where does finance come in? Well, the SDGs also said, well, yes, ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, is important. It's a very important lever. We need to have it there. But they recognize that 3 other sources of financing are just as important. And I'm so glad that in today's opening ceremony, all 3 of these sources were talked about. I hope you were all there because it was quite impressive. We need not only public international finance, we need public domestic finance. We need not only private international finance, we need domestic private finance. So all 4 sources of financing, and the thinking of the SDGs today and the finance for development processes, financing for development processes that are going on is how do we mix and match these? How do we track them? How do we leverage them and make the best use of them all together? And this is what I see resonating in all the discussions of landscape approach. Yes, how do you mix and match these different sources of financing together? And the white paper that Sara just talked about gives us all kinds of case studies where the public finance has become the seed funding, the leverager, the whatever, of all these other sources of finance, and it's really important that we keep that in mind. Now, I also heard today, I think, when you were launching the little green book, and that was a very nice session, Sara, I also heard today a talk about managing trade-offs. And that's the other key ingredient of a landscape approach. How do you manage those trade-offs? Let me give you an example from the SDGs. There is a target 2.3 that talks about doubling agricultural productivity by 2030. Impressive. But there's also a target 2.4, right down one line from it, that talks about sustainable agriculture, right? Now, if one were to double agriculture today with the business as usual, we would not be able to achieve the second target. Absolutely not. Okay? So how do we put these two together? How do we recognize that these two, in fact, need to be working together? Well, we do it by looking at the fine print. And this was where UNEP was able to endorse and agree to this particular target. It's because it's doubling smallholder productivity. Now, that is a very impressive target, and I hope you pay attention to that one when you're looking at the landscape approach, because we know we can double smallholder productivity through organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and other forms of landscape approaches. Finally, long-term finance, and I'm so glad again this morning there was talk about it. I won't repeat what was said. It was very, very nicely said. I'd like to ask you to take a look a little bit at what UNEP is doing in what it calls the UNEP Finance Initiative. Under this particular initiative, we have a study going on looking at the dysfunctions of the financial system and how that is creating constraints and stopping, basically, barriers to sustainable financing. I will not repeat all the barriers for you, but some of them are quite impressive. One of them, for example, is when will we ever have the courage to think about negative discount rates? We have to. If we want to talk about long-term, if we want to talk about the future of our children, if we want to talk about all the things we're talking about here, we have to look at the discount rates that banks and the financial system are using, and that's going to be some of it. So many things like that are enshrined in that study, and I really hope that you will take a look at it. I'm very pleased, honored to be here with you guys, and looking forward to this discussion on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Miriam. Before we get started, we would like, for the benefit of your panelists, to know who's actually in the room. Who is here from a financial institution? Okay. Who is managing financing for landscape? Okay. Who is managing landscape initiatives or working in landscape initiatives? Okay, and what are the rest of you all doing? Who works in policy and financial policy? Ah, there we go. Okay, so we have a pretty good distribution of, I think, kind of the stakeholders in this question. Thank you very much. The way we're going to be working today is first, my colleague Seth Shamus, who is the lead author on this, this white paper that has input from so many different partners, will be giving about a 10-minute overview of the white paper, and then we have four very distinguished and very diverse panelists who are going to respond and reflect on this from their own experience. So Seth is the Director for Policies and Markets at EcoAgriculture Partners. The rest of our panel then includes Clément Chenost, who's a co-founder of the Moringa Fund, many of you have heard of, which is a private financier of landscape investments. Then we have Ninka Stam, who's a senior manager for the Initiative for Sustainable Landscapes ISLA at the Sustainable Trade Initiative, IDH, who's a public sector financier of landscape investments. We then have Gustavo Garduno, who's an expert in regional analysis in the Biological Corridors Initiative, the National Commission for Knowledge and Use of Biodiversity in Mexico, which is called CONABIO, who's going to be sharing with us the case of the Selva Lacandona and the role of CONABIO as a landscape investment facilitator. Then we have Ludwig Liagre, who's an international consultant on forest and landscape finance with the Global Mechanism, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and FAO's Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative. And he's going to be talking about links to the finance for forest landscape restoration. And after that, we will have some questions and answers, and also we'd just love to get your all's perspectives on what you've heard, and also your suggestions on action steps moving forward. Okay, so from there, let me ask Seth to.
Hey, okay. I'm always pleasantly surprised when the technology works. Okay. Okay, so hello. Thank you very much, Sara and Miriam. Sara said, my name is Seth Shamus, Director for Policy and Markets at EcoAgriculture Partners, and I am very excited to be here today to discuss the issues that are laid out in this white paper, which are not only kind of making the case for how finance institutions and investors can benefit from operating in integrated landscape contexts, but also a bit about the challenges of these kind of cutting-edge funds and organizations that are trying to make these kinds of investments. So, and hopefully, by the end of the session, we'll have some really interesting discussion and some fresh, ambitious ideas of how to move forward together. So, the first question of kind of why this matters at all, and so if you are a financial actor, or if you are a farmer, or a business, or a cooperative within a landscape seeking finance, why is the concept of integrated landscape management important to you at all? And I think to kind of distill it to its essence, it has to do with reducing risk for your investment. So this is kind of a complicated figure in the paper. You can see it well if you'd like to study. So I won't talk through all of it, but you can see that there are some risks to investment that are dealt with at the farm level. There are some that can be dealt with at the supply chain level, and I think we see a lot of our interventions now are kind of the farm and supply chain level, but some of them, such as dealing with community conflict or physical water failure, loss of production areas, biodiversity, these are things that have to be dealt with at a landscape scale and can't be dealt with at the other scales. And these are issues that are very important for investors and financiers and businesses. So that kind of foundation of idea has driven the work of the finance working group of the Landscapes for People, Food, and Nature initiative. And this is what's driven this paper. So since a couple of you might see your picture there, whether you knew you were going to be up there or not. So the working group is trying to figure out ways, essentially, to scale up financing for integrated landscape management and to find opportunities for people who are interested in making these kinds of investments. So the first report we did, and this paper we have here builds on it, was released in 2014 and was kind of a broad survey of financial instruments and mechanisms that in some way were looking for multi-objective returns, including financial, environmental, and social. And then also, so we surveyed like 250 of those. And we also surveyed 29 integrated landscape initiatives, as we call them, these kind of multi-stakeholder groups within landscapes, to try to see how they were coordinating finance within the places where they were. So a variety of kind of case studies and conclusions that were drawn from that, and that's also kind of available on our site, and I think we have some copies of that here. So for this study, we wanted to take a deeper dive and look at some of the leading actors from our perspective. Some of these were impact, we know it's kind of the impact funds, and there's Moringa and Althelia and livelihoods and common land degradation neutrality, I'm afraid I'm gonna miss one of those. But then also we have kind of public kind of sector grants facilities. So that Ninka is representing the ISLA program and also the Global Environmental Facilities Integrated Approach Pilot. That we saw these as kind of leading actors, and we tried to understand from them what they were doing, which was particularly innovative, and what their key challenges were. So that's kind of the foundation of this paper, in addition to kind of some other background research and experiences of others within the working group and within EcoAgriculture partners.
Sorry, what is the title of this paper that you're
It's called Scaling Up Investment and Finance for Integrated Landscape Management, Challenges and Innovations. Yeah. Okay. So that's just what we set out to do. Challenges, innovations, recommendations for moving forward. So this is also to challenge you all, particularly in the back of the room. And for those of you who have the brief version of this figure is on the back of the brief, so you can just look at that. Okay. So all this learning over, So all this kind of learning experience over the past few years led us to come up with a kind of an illustration of what this means, this financing for integrated investment. So what does that actually mean? Who are the actors involved? And what would it look like if you actually tried to draw it? So this is what we came up with. So we have is that there are a series of what we're calling financiers, the people who are sources of funds for investments. So there are various kinds of impact investment funds, public agencies, foundations, companies, community banks, which in many cases directly engage with kind of landscape scale action and landscape scale initiatives. They're the institutional investors, which we're all very concerned with as well. And in our experience, so far those institutional investors aren't really engaging at the landscape scale as much as they are sort of capitalizing others who are trying to make those direct connections. So all of these financiers make different types of investment, which we've categorized into asset investment, investment in specific things, so like agroforestry, agroprocessing is an asset, and enabling, which is support for a multi-stakeholder platform, perhaps, or for supportive policy environment. So what distinguishes what we would call an integrated landscape investment from something else that one might call like sustainable land use or something is the idea that there is some type of entity, what we're calling here a landscape investment facilitator, and Gustavo is going to give an example of this, where there's someone who's trying to essentially inform the investment within a particular place, given the objectives of a landscape platform. So it's not like in control of anything, but that there is some sort of investment plan that exists. An investor coming in can sort of consult with that and try to understand what's going on in that place. In some cases, there's also a specific fund within a landscape. This is not necessary at all, and actually there are only a few cases that we're sort of familiar with, but we think it's an interesting idea where a group of stakeholders get together to identify specific investments, and then you can sort of aggregate funds for it. So this is kind of the conceptual illustration as it exists now. I'm sure will change in the future and all of that. All right, so thinking through it that way, what are the key challenges that we've seen and emerging solutions? So the first one we have is incorporating landscape criteria into decision making. So if you're a financier and you're trying to make an integrated landscape investment, so how can you begin to think about that? And so there are a variety of ways that groups are doing this. They're kind of come from the simple to the more complex. There's the idea of just the negative screen, like do make this particular investment in this particular place. But some of them recently have become a bit more sophisticated than that. For example, the IFC performance standards now have this idea of cumulative impact. So even if there's an investment that they would approve, they consider the landscape context and whether sort of the landscape has reached some sort of natural resources capacity. So that is considered within their decision-making process. So this idea of kind of spatial context, the tools are still developing, but it's something that major players are starting to think about. Mitigating investment risk, there are a variety of ways that we know that this is going on. There are the financial subsidies and guarantees, co-investment with landscape partners, documenting investment performance. Engagement in landscape partnerships, this is particularly key within integrated landscape investment context. How can sort of these financial actors actually engage with integrated landscape initiatives? So we have some different modes by which that can happen, which is explained in the paper, but an example of what that would mean is a case in Althelia, where there's a national forest reserve in Peru, and they work through a NGO, it's called AIDER, which is sort of one of these landscape investment facilitators. They're the ones who are in charge of identifying the drivers of deforestation. So Althelia has come in and with a coffee agroforestry project in a buffer zone, but the decision to operate in that place comes from this analysis from a group of stakeholders, that this is what's needed in this place. So Althelia didn't come in and say, we do agroforestry, so we're just looking for a good place to do agroforestry, or we want to do coffee. They were trying to be supportive of something that was going on in this place, and there was kind of a menu of things that they could do. So that's one way you can think about engaging as an investor. It's sort of a different type of entry point. Linking financial flows within landscape. So how do you bring together all this asset investment with itself and asset enabling investment together? Variety of ways this happens. An example of eco enterprises is a case where they have funds coming from a single instrument from an NGO, from multiple development banks, from other impact funds, from foundations, from family offices, and also from the largest bank in the United States, JP Morgan. So all of these different funders are coming together with their objectives and kind of supporting one particular stream of funding. So that's one way it happens. Another way is by having kind of technical capacity funds that are managed in companion to an investment facility. So actually, Moringa is an example of this, and the Common Land Fund, where you have your sort of investment vehicle, and then you have your technical capacity fund, which can support farmer training or even support like a landscape platform. Monitoring multiple outcomes at scale. So how do you know if you're succeeding at the landscape scale? And this is a broader question for kind of the landscape community. This thing keeps falling off. Anyway, so how can you find inexpensive, cheap, easy ways to know that you are having these multiple benefits? So there's not a simple answer to that. We do have examples of groups that are trying to do it. Rainforest Alliance has a very interesting tool called Natural Ecosystem Assessment. Gold Standard 3.0 now has a comprehensive certification framework that captures both positive and negative impacts of investment across the landscape on a range of issues, including greenhouse gases and livelihoods and health. So you'll see kind of in the recommendations, there's more work that needs to be done. So we move on to the recommendations. The first one we have is about these standards for monitoring and measurement. How can we develop sort of proxy indicators where you can cheaply measure 1, 2, 3 things and understand everything that's going on in the landscape? This is kind of a major challenge in our field. Landscape investment incubators. We hear from funds a lot that there aren't enough bankable deals to do this kind of thing. And we also hear from people on the ground, from farmers, from cooperatives, from businesses, that they can't find financing. So there's a couple of ways of going about trying to make this link. One is working to build the technical capacity of the people on the ground so they can build financial literacy, business plans, things like that, which can be done through kind of landscape investment incubators. And another way of going about that is actually establishing some kind of brokering service, which could happen at the landscape or the national, the international scale. And then, public policy, incorporating these ideas into public finance. I think in a lot of places, these ideas are starting to come together, the idea that agencies and sectors need to work with each other. But there need to be more of these kinds of programs. The ones that do exist need to scale up. And then finally, I'll just end by circling back to what Miriam was saying, that as we try to work towards implementation of SDG goals and move from business as usual economic growth plans to kind of green growth plans, that there are a variety of scales in which we need to think about investment, from the public sector and the private sector. And landscape will be kind of a key frontier in that kind of conceptualization. So thank you very much. You can download the paper fully at peoplefoodandnature.org, which is the LPFN site. And yeah, okay, thank you.
I'd like to invite Clément up then, please, to talk about your perspective.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So first, I would like to thank EcoAgriculture partner and UNEP for the invitation to share ideas today. So Moringa is one of these of the few private players investing. No, I don't have presentation. We'll just talk. Is one of the few private players investing in landscape today. So we have raised 84 million euro to invest in agroforestry in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa. So we are an impact fund. What does that mean? It means that our investors will judge us on our economical return. We need to have a return, but also on our social and environmental return. And we need to have indicators to show what will be our performance on the three pillars. How will we reach this impact? Well, we want to invest in agroforestry. I think everybody here knows what is agroforestry, combination of trees with crops and or animals. So it's a way to answer the growing need of markets for timber and agricultural products while having a positive environmental impact. On the social side, we want to work on outgrowing programs. So it's programs where an entity, it can be a company, a farmer, a cooperative, is partnering with small holders through contractual agreements. So we believe in this kind of mechanism, and we believe this mechanism can have a strong social impact for the farmers. But let's talk about an example, a very concrete example. We have invested at the beginning of this year in Nicaragua, in the coffee sector. This is a nice example because in the coffee sector, you've got challenges today. So coffee is being hit by climate change. It's an altitude crop. And you've got very clear climate change effect. You've got diseases, rust, nematodes attacking the plantation, and farmers in very difficult situation today. On the other side, you've got opportunities. Well,